Minds again this morning as we prepare to just live in that conscious beingness this morning. Breathe in. I invite you to relax your bodies. If you're holding any stress in any part of your body, just allow it to relax and let go. Release. Surrender. I invite you to focus in on this breath of life, this breath of beingness, this breath that is part of your manifesting as an expression of God here in this realm. And I invite you to take on this passage. This passage is from 30 Days of Living with Intention. Today, I am renewed. Today, I am renewed. Today, I am open to renewing my body, mind, and spirit. I pause to appreciate my life so far. What an incredible journey. I make a list of my strengths, successes, and blessings, and then I read them aloud to myself with a voice of love and appreciation. If I'm carrying any worries or doubts from the past, I easily shake them off and clear my mind. I declare today is full of unlimited opportunities. I move forward knowing God is always with me. I am an overcomer, a happiness magnet, and a force for good. I honor my renewal by finding daily moments to just be. I give myself sacred time by scheduling hours or dates on my calendar to put aside the busyness of life, to do the things I love to do and appreciate and focus on rejuvenating myself from the nature of God within me. I grow in awareness. I remember that all people have the innate ability to renew, shake off the old, and be purveyors of good. Rather than criticizing others or putting others down, I am grateful for the spiritual growth and renewal available to us all. I invite you to take on this affirmation today. I am an overcomer, a happiness magnet, and a force for good. I invite you to take that inside to your inner knowing this morning for a short period of meditation as we enter the silence. Enter the silence. I invite you to stay still just for a few more moments here. Breathing in. Breathe in love. Breathing out. Breathe out care and compassion. Breathe in love. Breathe out care and compassion. I am a caring and compassionate being. I am worthy of my own love, my own care, my own compassion. I am an overcomer, a happiness magnet, and a force for good. I am an advocate for my own well-being and happiness. And I know when I care for others, it means I have more to give. So I invite you to take in this breath of awareness, this breath of knowingness. I am an overcomer, a happiness magnet, and a force for good. Ever so gently, I invite you to return your awareness back to your body temple. Maybe you just wiggle fingers and toes for a few moments. Maybe you decide to roll your wrist or roll your ankles. Maybe roll your shoulders back a little bit and then roll them to the front, or roll your neck ever so gently. And when you're ready, I invite you to bring your attention back to this time and space. How was that for a little self-care this morning? Good. So I'm going to invite you to say this with me today. We'll do one part at a time. I am an overcomer.
I am an overcomer.
A happiness magnet. And a force for good. All right. Well, I expect you to remember that because I'm going to ask you to say it several times during the service. Just kidding. Just kidding. All right. I'm trying to carry over some of that laughter that Bill gave us last week. I want to thank you again for joining us here this morning, whether you're joining us here in person or live on Facebook. You're here on a beautiful, yet probably warm outside Sunday morning. So I know you're probably enjoying the air conditioning, but thank you for being here. This month, we have focused on this idea of nurturing yourself and others. So all of our Sunday services have been a part of this message of nurturing yourself and therefore having more so that you can nurture others. So at the beginning of this month, I started with a talk about self-awareness and how becoming more self-aware from a place of curiosity, hope, and yes, optimism and positivity and joy, you can assist yourself in nurturing yourself and therefore being able to nurture others. The second Sunday this month, I talked about the gift of self-compassion and giving oneself love from this place of self-compassion. Last week, our own Bill Warner taught us more about the gift of laughter, and I want to say I appreciate that message. I didn't get to see it here live, but I got to catch it on Facebook this week. He not only made us laugh with his message, but he also emphasized the healing and the beneficial qualities of laughter. And laughter, too, is part of this self-care process. So everything we've talked about this month really comes down to this idea of self-care. It overlaps and supports our self-care practice. Our self-care practice comes out of both self-awareness and self-compassion. So when we learn more about ourselves and we see ourselves through the lens of love, through the eyes of love, then we see that we too are worthy of our own self-care, our own compassion, our own self-awareness. All this comes together. So as we conclude our series this month on nurturing yourself and others, I want to talk to you a little bit more about this idea of self-care and what it means. Self-care means that we recharge our batteries so that we show up with more to give and more to offer to others. That's what it means, very simply. We know that Jesus did this too. As a way shower, he would oftentimes take time away from the crowds, time away from his disciples to go into fasting, a prayer, or meditation, time away to recharge, reconnect. And he took this time, and he never said, "Oh no, I'm not going to take that time." He just took the time. And science seems to support this idea that we take time for ourselves to recharge our batteries. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the science. Because in addition to helping you manage your stress levels, lower your risk of illness, increase your energy, self-care can also help you prevent burnout, which is important for all of us who are caring for other people, whatever capacity we are caregivers, rather that be the professional caregiver, rather that be here in this community caring for each other, going out into the community to care for other people, caring for our loved ones at home. Whatever capacity we care for others, we don't want to burn out in our caring process. Now, in a 2008 study of hospice professionals, results indicated a relationship between self-care strategies and lower levels of burnout, as well as lower levels of compassion fatigue. Self-care strategies also correlated with higher levels of compassion satisfaction. What does this mean? Self-care recharges our batteries so that we're better able to give, so that we have more compassion. Now, in a study of the state of self-care research, so it's kind of like a study about studies, right? Researchers found not just the beneficial effects of self-care, including well-being, but they also noted lower morbidity, lower mortality, and lower health care cost in relation to those who practice self-care. Now, I don't know about you, but I want a lower risk of morbidity and mortality. So what are some of the other benefits of self-care? Amy Gruber, who is a clinical psychologist, says, quote, "The impact of self-care is that we get to model to others how to prioritize and tend to oneself. We're actually paving the path and giving permission for others to do so as well. In the end, it's a reciprocal act." What is she saying here? She's saying we are the way showers. We get a chance to show others that, yes, you are worthy too of the gift of self-care, the gift of self-compassion, the gift of self-love, of nurturing yourself. I like this quote from Katie Reed, so I included it. She's the author of the Self-Care 365 Journal. This could be a motto for our self-care practice. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. And that is so true. That's what it does. It recharges our batteries. One more quote I'm going to share with you this morning. This is from an anonymous author. "People who wonder if the glass is half full or half empty miss the point. The glass is refillable." Don't we like that one? The glass is refillable. Now, what do you think of when you think of self-care? I think our natural inclination when we think of self-care is to think of those luxurious, ritzy, really expensive ways we can take care of ourselves, right? We think about those ways we're going to self-indulge. We're going to go over the top and really take care of ourselves. Maybe it's a birthday treat. Maybe it's, we had a rough week and so we're going to go get our nails done. Now, while expensive spa days or salon days or massage sessions or, bath bombs and scented body lotion and foot soaks and all that stuff can be self-care, that's not what I'm going to talk about here today. I'm speaking of a more practical idea of self-care, a day-to-day approach to self-care that's much more down to earth. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go out and splurge on yourself. I invite you to do that. Absolutely. Matter of fact, what I'm doing this afternoon at 6 p.m. is I'm going to a healing sound bath workshop just down the road from us at a yoga studio. So self-care can be defined as the practice of taking an active role, of protecting one's own well-being and happiness. Now, I mentioned earlier, I can't speak for you, but I know I want to be an active agent for my own well-being and happiness. I want to be an advocate for my own well-being and happiness. So I don't see this as simply putting up a wall and going into defensive mode and I'm protecting my well-being and happiness. No, I view it as being an active agent. I'm cultivating, I'm manifesting my own well-being and happiness when I take in self-care, when I use the practice of self-care. But here's the thing. If I were to take a survey of this room for each and every one of us, what we thought self-care is going to be different. What works for me isn't always going to work for you, and what works for you, sometimes that's probably not going to be quite what I had in mind, right? And you're like, your idea is to go out and with a group of people and enjoy, a lot of people and a party situation. That's not for me. That's not my idea of self-care, right? But that's the beauty of it, is we are each unique expressions, and so we each have our own idea of what this means to us. So self-care is also something that is more complex than just being like, hey, go out and get a massage, right? It happens on multiple levels. We have our physical bodies. We have physical self-care. We have our mindsets, our mental health to think about. So we have mental self-care. And then we also have the wholeness of the spiritual aspect. We have spiritual self-care. So here's the thing. We can ask ourselves at any moment, are we allowing ourselves to focus on our wholeness, to focus on all areas of our self-care? Are we focusing on the physical, the mental, and the spiritual? Or maybe we're having a rough day. Maybe we're just focused on one of these or two of these or none of these, right? But we have the availability each day to ask ourselves, how am I caring for myself today? Are you being an advocate for your whole being by giving yourself the gift of self-care? That's a question you can only answer for yourself. I can't answer it for any one of you. But I'm going to talk about these three different levels because I think it's important to think about all three levels in which we can nurture ourselves. So on a physical level, self-care means those practices that support our physical well-being. And it can be fairly simple during the day. Maybe it's taking breaks from physical labor or things that are keeping us really busy. Maybe it's making sure we get a good night's sleep, making sure we're staying hydrated, not just with juice and soda, right? But actual things that kind of nourish our body. Maybe it's eating food that really energizes our body. Not just, I like a lot of snack foods, I admit, but not just the stuff that is off the shelf, but the stuff that actually has all the nutrients that's going to energize our bodies. Maybe it's getting out of bed or off the couch and making sure we're moving our bodies, right? I know I'm really bad about this during the summer. When it gets hot, I don't want to go outside at all. But I still go out and mow the lawn. I still go out and do some of these things. I just do it a little bit earlier, right? And if it's too hot, I do physical activity indoors. Or sometimes we go out and we'll walk around someplace, go to a shopping center and decide to hide my wallet so I'm not spending all my money, right? And walk around in the AC. But how are you enjoying that? Are you doing things like Tai Chi or yoga or maybe walks in nature or hiking? What are those things that you enjoy doing? So I'm going to ask you to do a self-awareness check-in right now. Didn't know this would be participatory this morning, did you? So I'm going to invite you to do a self-awareness check-in. Take a moment to consider what recharges your physical batteries. What recharges your physical batteries? Breathe into that awareness. I want you to make a mental note or even a written note, if you so choose to, about what helps your physical well-being. What are you discovering or rediscovering about yourself today? Being aware of your physical body and how your physical energy levels are renewed and recharged helps you be a better advocate for your own physical well-being. So I'm going to shift now to think about the mental aspects of self-care. On a mental level, self-care can mean those practices that support our mindset, our mental well-being. It can be as simple as taking breaks from the busyness of our day, those tasks that are really intense, right? It's those times that we slow down. We take a moment to pause. Maybe we take a couple of extra deep breaths, right? Focus on our breathing for a moment. It can mean something as simple as changing your scenery. So if you've been stuck in the same room for several hours doing a task, move yourself to a different location. Check out something else. Take a 30-second, a minute walk outside, even if it's 100 degrees. Say, you know what? I can't do a whole block. It's too hot, too sweaty. I'm just going to walk right around my house and get a little bit of a change of scenery, even if it's 30 seconds a day. Right? One of the things I enjoy doing, and I talked about this earlier when I said I don't enjoy mowing the lawn, I really don't. But one of the things that I do enjoy doing while I'm mowing the lawn is listening to my morning mix playlist. It is my happy music that gets me up, gets me motivated. And so yes, I'm not an early bird. I don't enjoy getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to mow the lawn before it gets too hot, but I do it. And when I'm listening to my music, my perspective is shifted. I'm no longer dreading the task. Now I'm looking forward to the task. So maybe it's listening to your favorite play mix, right? Your favorite playlist. Mental self-care can also mean taking time to connect with others. So yes, it can mean socializing with others, going out there, reconnecting with your loved ones, with your friends, with your family. It can also mean reconnecting with nature or reconnecting with yourself, taking time to journal, taking time to reflect on how you're feeling that day. So, self-check-in number 2. I'm going to invite you now, take a moment to consider what recharges your mental batteries. What is that for you? I want you to breathe into this awareness. I want you to make a mental note or a physical note if you're taking notes today. What is it that recharges your mental batteries? What are you discovering or rediscovering about yourself today? Being aware of how we recharge our batteries mentally, how we reset and get away from the stress and the anxiety and the worry and all those things helps us be a better advocate for our own mental well-being. So lastly, this morning I'm going to talk about spiritual self-care. And I save this for last, not because I think it's the most important, which I do think it's the most important, but because our spiritual self-care often includes helping our mental and our physical well-being. When we do the spiritual, it attunes and aligns a lot of other stuff for us automatically. So on a spiritual level, self-care can mean those practices that support your spiritual journey, your spiritual well-being, and your sense of connection with the divine. Now in Unity, we tend to talk about 3, but there's a lot of others. But these are the 3 that you'll hear most of in Unity. And they are affirmative prayer, meditation, and gratitude practices. We talk about those a lot. Why? Because they're important. Spiritual practices like these can have a tremendous impact on our sense of oneness and our connection with others, our connection with that divine presence. So I'm going to talk a little bit about all 3 of these, but know that because I'm approaching it from a spiritual sense doesn't mean it doesn't have mental health and physical benefits, because they do. So affirmative prayer is the practice of using positive, uplifting statements of spiritual truth about yourself, others, or the situation at hand. What does it look like? It looks like the affirmation we did earlier, and I'm going to invite you to say it with me again today. I am an overcomer, a happiness magnet, and a force for good. That right there is an affirmative prayer statement. It can be said in the meditative pauses that we want to take for prayer, or it can be said just as an affirmation alone to help uplift our day. It is our ability to see the divine presence, spiritual truth in all persons, situations, and outcomes. That's what affirmative prayer is. So I'm going to invite you now to consider meditation, because meditation can be another aspect of our affirmative prayer practice. We can go into the silence when we practice affirmative prayer. We can combine these 2 things. So what does meditation allow you to do? It allows you to slow down your busy minds, your monkey minds, to connect with your breath, the very life force, the very thing that is providing oxygen to your blood. And then you can focus on something like an intention, a mantra, or even another focal point as you connect to that divine presence and connect to yourself. Using the breath, that's what the Buddha taught, as a way to connect to yourself, to connect to that inner knowing. Lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about gratitude, because it's another powerful practice. Gratitude allows us to see the good in our lives, as well as affirmative prayer. And how does gratitude differ from affirmative prayer? Well, gratitude's recognizing those things that are good in our lives, not just the spiritual truth, not just the absolute statements of what we are as spiritual beings having a human experience. Gratitude says, oh wow, that person really showed up for me today. Oh wow, I was so blessed to have that experience today. You know what? I saw the most beautiful bird outside this morning, and I was so grateful to hear its song. That's what gratitude is. We have a tendency as humans towards negativity bias. I know you've heard me talk about this negativity bias before, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. In our ancient past, it helped serve a purpose. We were fearful of the things that threatened our actual lives on a day-to-day basis. The tigers and the lions or the bears or whatever it was, right? Today, we don't necessarily need that as much, right? Our lives aren't threatened on a day-to-day basis. We're not going out and hunting and gathering like we once did. So we can take a moment to kind of shift that, and that's what gratitude does. It helps us shift our perspective towards the good, to remember that there are good things. Yeah, you might have had a bad day. Yeah, you might have had to wake up early to mow the lawn, right? But you can focus on the good things. I got to listen to my favorite music today. That can be a part of your gratitude practice. So I'm going to invite you once again to enter into some self-awareness here. And I want you to take a moment now to consider what recharges your spiritual batteries. What is that for you? What is the practice that really kind of resets you, shifts your perspective? And I want you to breathe into that awareness. I want you to make a mental note or maybe a physical written note about what that practice is for you, what supports your spiritual well-being. What are you discovering or rediscovering about yourself today? So being aware of our spiritual connection and how our spiritual connection is best supported helps us be better advocates for our own spiritual well-being. But it's not just the spiritual. It's also our mental and our physical well-being. That's the beauty of having a spiritual practice, is when you do the spiritual work, this other stuff tends to follow suit. You recognize that you are worthy. You're recognizing that, yes, you have a better mental well-being and a better physical well-being that comes out of that spiritual practice. But I want to tell you what Unity says about self-care as a spiritual tool. They say self-care as being willing and committing to rejuvenate your soul and find your center, the place of unshakable peace and stability where you can weather the storms of life. They go on to say being intentional in your self-care practice is the greatest act of love we can give to ourselves. I'm going to repeat this to you. Being intentional in our self-care practice is the greatest act of love that we can give ourselves. So self-care is a practice. It's an action that we take not just for our own benefit, but it comes from a place of seeing ourselves as expressions of the divine, from seeing ourselves as worthy of our own love, our own support, and our own attention. We are worthy of our own care. Self-care isn't selfish. Rather, it's an acknowledgement that we are equally valuable. If we truly believe, like our unity principles teach, that God is everywhere present and in every single being, in every single circumstance, and that we are expressions of this divine presence that we call God, then we too must be worthy of well-being and happiness. I want you to say this with me. I am worthy.
I am worthy.
Our self-care practice recharges our physical, our mental, and our spiritual batteries so that we're not just able to take better care of ourselves, but so that we're better able to take care of others, so that we can show up and be way showers. And through caring for ourselves, we get to model to others that they too are worthy. They are worthy of self-care, they are worthy of well-being, and they are worthy of happiness. So I'm going to invite you to turn to your neighbor right now and say, you are worthy. All right. Yes. All right, once more with gusto. I am an overcomer.
I am an overcomer.
A happiness magnet.
A happiness magnet.
And a force for good.
And a force for good.
Thank you for joining me here this morning. I appreciate your attention this morning. And even though this is our last talk in this series, I want you to come back next month. Come back next Sunday, because we're going to start a new series, and Bill's going to kick it off for us.
Yep.
It's about finding your center. So myself and Bill are going to be talking next week, but on the 15th, on our third Sunday, guess what? We're going to have a special guest speaker. So I invite you to come back for that Sunday too. Thank you again for joining us here today. Namaste. All right, I'm going to get us to shift into our consciousness of giving. And if you have made a prayer request using those slips in the seat backs, now is the time for you to get those ready as well. If you are feeling spiritually